They said I wasn't their daughter anymore, but in court, they had to call me by name. I still remember the sound of my mother's voice the night she disowned me. Cold. Controlled. Like she was placing an order at a restaurant, not cutting ties with her only daughter. If you walk out with him, don't ever come back. I walked anyway, not because I didn't love them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop begging. Jacob stood beside me, quiet but steady. He didn't speak for me. He didn't have to. His presence alone was rebellion to them. My parents wanted a future filled with cocktail parties, investment portfolios, and the right kind of people. Jacob was none of that. He was a mechanic. Black. From a working-class family. That was enough. They never said the words outright. They didn't need to. It was in the way they looked at him like he tracked mud into their perfect lives. In the way they told me I was throwing everything away for someone who doesn't belong in our world. Their world, not mine. When I moved out, they told everyone I'd lost her way. They didn't just cut me off, they rewrote me, erased me from group photos, left my name out of Caleb's graduation announcements. When people asked where I was, they said, she made her choice. What they meant was, she stopped obeying. And in our family, obedience was love. Jacob. And I built our life slowly. Apartment by apartment. Shift by shift. We didn't have fancy dinners or vacations, but we had peace. And in that peace, I started to heal. 7 years passed without a call. Not on birthdays. Not when I opened my business. Not even when I got married. Jacob's family became mine. His mother held my hand when I gave birth to our daughter. My mother never even knew she existed. Then one afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. It was Elaine, my mother. Her voice cracked for the first time in my life. Naomi, we need your help, please. I didn't say anything, just listened. She said Caleb was in trouble. Legal trouble. Financial fraud. The kind that doesn't go away with a good lawyer or a donation. And the only person who could testify, the only one who could tip the scales in their favor, was me. Me, the daughter they disowned. Hung up without a word. For 3 days I sat with it, the weight of 7 years of silence pressing against this one request. Then I made a decision, not out of revenge, out of clarity. If they wanted to see me again, it would be on my terms, and that's how I ended up in court, sitting across from the people who erased me, waiting for them to speak my name again. Growing up, love in our house came with conditions. Be perfect, be polite, be exactly who they need you to be. I learned early that silence was safer than truth, that obedience was rewarded and resistance was punished, not with yelling, but with absence. My mom, Elaine, was all appearances, the kind of woman who ironed napkins and corrected your tone at breakfast. My father, Richard, was the enforcer, not loud, but final. His approval came in nods, his disappointment in complete withdrawal. Caleb, my younger brother, never had to try. He simply was the favorite. They loved to say we were a respectable family. Church on Sundays, college prep on weekdays, holiday photos perfectly posed. But underneath it, there was fear of what people would say, of being different, of anything that didn't fit their curated narrative. And I never quite fit. I wasn't wild. I wasn't rebellious. I just had opinions, feelings. I asked questions they didn't want to answer. I didn't pretend to like the boys they paraded in front of me. And when I met Jacob, kind, thoughtful, real, I knew immediately they wouldn't approve. At you. First, I tried to hide it. I minimized him in conversations, called him a friend when I knew he was everything. But they could smell defiance like smoke. When I finally told them we were serious, the silence was deafening. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. My father simply stopped making eye contact. Caleb called him a phase, said I'd come to my senses. I remember laughing bitterly. Caleb had wrecked 2 cars by then, failed out of college once, and still got praise at every meal. I brought home stability, love, ambition, and got shame. I begged them to meet Jacob properly. I organized dinner. He brought flowers. My dad left the table 10 minutes in. My mom stared at the food like it was poisoned. When we left, Jacob said, "I don't think they hate me. I think they hate how much you love me." He was right. When they issued the ultimatum, I didn't think they meant it. Choose us or choose him. I thought family meant unconditional love. I was wrong. Love in our house had a dress code, and Jacob didn't wear the right shoes. So I chose him. Not to defy them, to save myself. I packed in one night. No goodbye hugs, no last looks. Just the sound of my father's voice saying, "You walk out that door. You're no longer our daughter." And my mother echoing it in silence. But even then, even after all that, I never imagined they'd come back, let alone needing me. Looking back, the warning signs were always there. Not loud, not explosive, just steady patterns of being dismissed, compared, and told who I should be. Caleb could miss curfews, flunk classes, even lie about money. And still, he was the boy, with potential. I was the disappointment with attitude. In high school, I won a state writing competition. They didn't come to the ceremony. "We already have a dinner planned," Mom said. A month later, when Caleb scored a goal in a local soccer game, they bought him a new watch. "He deserves a reward," Dad said. I got silence. My clothes were too loud. My laugh was too much. Every time I expressed joy in something they didn't value, poetry, dance, community projects, I saw their faces tighten. I learned to shrink, to water myself down into someone digestible. But Jacob never asked me to. When we started dating, I noticed how quickly their discomfort turned into control. "He's not your level," Dad said. "You're wasting yourself," Mom whispered. They called his family rough, though they'd never met them. The red flag wasn't just racism. It was that they saw my love as a threat. Caleb once called Jacob charity. Said I was trying to be a social justice warrior by dating beneath me. My parents didn't correct him. They laughed. That was the moment I realized they didn't see Jacob as human. They saw him as a symbol of rebellion, of shame. When Jacob got into a trade school program and started working full-time, I told them with pride. "He's building his own business," I said. My dad's reply? "Let me know when he does something worth talking about." I stopped sharing after that. The final red flag was Thanksgiving. I showed up alone, hoping to avoid tension. My mom asked, "So, is he still around?" I said yes. She looked disappointed. Dad said, "He won't last. They never do." It wasn't concern. It was a verdict. A refusal to believe love could exist outside their framework. When I told them we were getting married, they didn't cry. They didn't fight. They just went quiet. Days later, my bank account was frozen, a joint account they'd once helped open. No warning, just gone. That was their version of a wedding gift, financial punishment. I sent one last message. "You don't have to love him, but you don't get to control me." No response. That was the end. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut, softly, finally. And for years I believed that was the last chapter. Until I heard my mother's voice say the word she swore she never would. "Please." The worst betrayal didn't come from their words. It came from the erasure, the quiet, intentional rewriting of our family where I no longer existed. At Caleb's engagement party, I wasn't invited, but someone sent me photos, group shots, smiling faces, my name not spoken once. There was even a slideshow, childhood memories, family milestones. My face appeared only once, quickly, in a corner of a group photo, cropped badly as if they tried to remove me but didn't have time. Everyone else had their moments. I was a ghost among them. I confronted Mom through text, not angry, just heartbroken. "Did you really cut me out of the video?" She replied, "We didn't think you'd want to be included after the choices you've made." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just rejected, I was erased. Friends asked about me, distant relatives. My parents said I moved away, wanted a quiet life, wasn't in touch. They painted it like I disappeared by choice, like I ghosted them. Meanwhile, I had been living, loving, building a world they didn't want to know. The final blow came on what would have been my wedding weekend. I posted a photo, just one. Me and Jacob, holding hands in front of the courthouse. No tags. No captions. Just love. My mother replied privately, "How humiliating. You used to have standards." I didn't reply. She blocked me after that. So did Dad. Caleb never followed me in the first place. I wasn't just disapproved of, I was discarded. Like a branch cut cleanly from the tree. No room for my roots. No acknowledgement of my growth. But I kept growing. My small business took off. I worked long nights, balanced motherhood, and eventually opened a second location. Jacob was steady, safe. Everything they swore he couldn't be. And through it all, not one word from them until the day Caleb's world came crashing down. Financial misconduct, fraud. He'd used their company to move illegal funds, and it spiraled into an investigation. When the authorities got involved, my name surfaced, because years ago I had flagged an irregular payment when I was still on paper as a partner. I never followed up. I didn't know how deep it went, but now they needed me. My statement could clear Caleb, or seal his fate. And suddenly I was no longer irrelevant. I was essential. And they had to face the truth. The daughter they erased held the key to their survival. After the call from my mother, I sat on the floor of my office, staring at the wall. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream. It was like every muscle in my body had turned to stone. 7 years of silence, and now suddenly I was important. But not as a daughter, as a tool. Jacob found me there. He didn't ask what happened. He just sat beside me, held my hand. Later, I told him everything, word for word. The voicemail, the desperation, the sudden humility from the same woman who once said I was an embarrassment. For days, I replayed every moment, every door they closed, every insult whispered in the form of advice, how they turned my love into rebellion and my joy into shame. And now they needed my voice, my memory, my mercy. Part of me wanted to say yes, not for them, but for Caleb. Because I knew what it felt like to be thrown away, and part of me wanted to say no, to finally protect the version of me that begged for love and got silence instead. I walked through the city aimlessly one night, past the church I grew up in, the bakery my mom loved, the school where Dad once spoke at career day. All places that used to be mine, now haunted by their absence. Or maybe by my own erasure, I thought of my daughter. What would I teach her if I said yes? That forgiveness is mandatory? That you owe love to those who withheld it? And if I said no, would I be cruel? Or just finally honest? Jacob said gently, "Whatever you choose, make sure it's for you, not for who they want you to be." That was the clearest thing anyone had said to me. And that night, I decided I wouldn't give them the version of Naomi they left behind. I'd show up as who I am now. I reached out to Mr. Peterson, the judge, explained my involvement, offered my records, my knowledge, but also told him I wouldn't be manipulated into shielding someone who never once protected me. He nodded. Then we'll let the facts speak. The court date was set. And this time, I wouldn't be erased. I'd be the one walking in with my name, my truth, and nothing left to prove. In the days leading up to the hearing, I went through old files I hadn't looked at in years, back when I was still on paper as a silent partner in one of Dad's side ventures. A formality, really, from before I walked away. But I had access, and I kept records. It started with one transfer. Small, unusual, something I'd flagged back then, assuming it was a mistake. No one responded. Now, years later, I realized it was the first thread in a web Caleb had been weaving. Quiet fraud. Layered cover-ups. All under their family name. Jacob sat beside me at the kitchen table as I built the case. Not as revenge, as clarity. I wasn't trying to bury Caleb. I was just done protecting a family that never protected me. If my name was going to be in that courtroom, it would be attached to the truth. When Mr. Peterson reviewed my submission, he was surprised. "You've kept impeccable records," he said. I wanted to tell him it wasn't by accident. I learned long ago that being the daughter no one believes means documenting everything. The night before court, I got another call. Mom again. Her voice was soft, desperate. "Naomi, please, if not for us, do it for your brother." I let the silence stretch. Then said, "You've never called me by my name in 7 years. You only use it now that you need something." She tried to cry. I didn't stop her. I let her feel what I'd carried for so long. "This isn't punishment," I said. "This is reality catching up." And then calmly, I hung up. No shouting. No closure speech. Just the sound of a daughter who had nothing left to lose. In court, I walked in wearing the same blazer I wore when I opened my second business. It was a small detail, but for me, it meant everything. I wasn't there as their daughter. I was there as myself. Complete, independent, witness and woman. Caleb avoided my eyes. My parents looked like they hadn't slept. Mr. Peterson began. "We're here today to examine the misconduct surrounding multiple financial transfers involving the Adams family company." My name appeared on screen, not as an accused, as a key witness. I took the stand. Clear. Calm. Every sentence came from a place of hard-earned truth. No embellishments, just facts. And when the judge asked if I had anything to add, I said, "Only that silence doesn't mean ignorance. Some of us remember everything, even when we're told we don't belong." And in that moment, the courtroom didn't see the girl they erased. They saw the woman they couldn't ignore. The courtroom was silent when I stepped down. Not tense, just still. As if everyone felt the shift. As if they understood something important had happened without a single raised voice. I returned to my seat and didn't look back at my parents. I didn't need to. Mr. Peterson reviewed the evidence, and when he spoke again, it wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Caleb Adams knowingly used joint business structures for personal financial gain. Based on the testimony and documentation, the court recommends formal charges. My parents didn't gasp. They didn't stand. They just sank into their chairs, finally realizing this wouldn't be swept under the rug. That their last card, me, had played itself on its own terms. Not to save them, but to stand for the truth. The irony was bitter and perfect. The daughter they disowned for not obeying now held the only voice they needed. And she chose to use it, not for vengeance, but for justice. The difference was subtle but deep. I didn't come to destroy. I came to finish the story. Outside, reporters hovered, mostly for Caleb, but someone asked, "Are you Naomi Adams?" I nodded once. No smile, no statement, just presence. For the first time in years, my name wasn't a weapon or a whisper. It stood tall beside me. Later that week, I got a letter, not handwritten, typed, from my father. No apology, just a single line. "You did what you had to do." That was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I would ever get. I folded it once and tossed it in the trash. I didn't tell Jacob right away. I didn't need to. He saw it in my posture, the way I walked lighter. "You look free," he said. And I was. Not because I won in court, but because I finally stopped hoping they'd change. The truth is, justice didn't mean seeing them fall. It meant seeing myself clearly, without their distortions. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't rebellious. I was never the problem. Was simply the daughter who outgrew their control. And in that courtroom, the name they tried to erase was spoken under oath, not as shame, but as fact. They begged for help. And I answered with the only thing they never expected: dignity. After the hearing, I didn't go home right away. I drove to the small park near where Jacob and I had our first real conversation. I sat on the same bench. The city moved around me, loud and alive, but for once, I felt completely still. Not lost, centered. I thought about how much of my life I spent trying to earn something that should have been mine without question: love, recognition, safety, and how many times I mistook silence for peace, distance for protection. But now I knew better. Silence is a decision, and I was done living in it. Our daughter was drawing on the living room floor when I got home. She looked up, smiled, and ran into my arms like the world was still simple. And in her arms, it was. She didn't care what courtroom I'd been in. She only cared that I came back whole. I told Jacob I didn't want to talk about them anymore, not out of anger, but because they no longer shaped the future I was building. He nodded, no questions, just a quiet, steady presence. The same kind of love that made me brave enough to walk away all those years ago. In the weeks that followed, I got letters. From extended family, from people who used to pretend I didn't exist. Some wanted to apologize, others wanted to reconnect. But I had no space left for people who only find your value when you become useful. I invested in my business. Started a scholarship fund for women pursuing trade and creative careers. Named it after my daughter. I didn't put my family's last name on anything. They had removed it from me once. I wasn't giving it back power now. One morning, I saw a headline. Caleb was sentenced to community service and a hefty fine. My parents weren't quoted. No statements, no photo ops, just a quiet ending to a loud fall. And I felt nothing. No glee, no pain, just distance. Clean and earned. I took my daughter to visit the courthouse one day. Showed her the room. She asked, "What did you do here?" I said, "I told the truth." That's all I said. And that was enough. She held my hand tighter after that. I'll never get back the years they took. The birthdays missed, the moments of celebration I dimmed so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But I got something better. A life that's mine. Built without their conditions. Loved without fear. Because in the end, they disowned me for choosing him. But in court, and in life, I chose myself. And that was the name they had no choice but to say out loud.